Hi, welcome to Jadekind Gaming. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to be flipping through and reviewing the Mythic Odysseys of Theros campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is our second of the Magic the Gathering settings that we've had brought over. Some people get all upset with, oh, they should be, bringing back all the classic stuff. It's like, we want Dark Sun and Spelljammer, and me too. But also I love these. I love the new ones. I love the dive into Magic settings and turning it into a D&D setting. I find this greatly interesting as well. Ultimately, for me personally, I don't play in any of the other settings. Sometimes I'll use, maybe I'll pull things from them for part of a campaign, but generally in a game I run, I'm doing my own setting. So really for me, I just love any interesting look at a new setting, some new ideas, new races, subclasses, monsters, and items. We got some interesting stuff here, and let's take a look. So, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which this is basically Magic's Greek, ancient Greek setting, basically. Anvil Rot Raptor there. Contents. Welcome to Theros. We start off, basic idea, a bit of history and myth, which they talk about basically in the setting they bleed together. Art in this beautiful, by the way, is amazing. So they just talk about a high-level view of the setting to begin and give us our languages and delve right into character creation. Fun part. And one of the things that this game gives is a supernatural gift. The idea that as a hero, you have something beyond just what normal D&D character creation has. One example, the first one here, Anvil Rot, is the idea that you are constructed. You are fashioned from bronze or whatever. So you have constructed resilience, giving you that sort of, immune to disease, don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. Don't need to sleep. Advantage against poisons. Special type of resting on your long rests to keep awareness, and some just general characteristics. So you get extra stuff on top of normal character creation. And they have these for having a heroic destiny, iconoclast, because there are piety rules and you get benefits from the deities. So here is if you're not going to do that, you can use your supernatural gift to get benefits at certain levels. So it doesn't really matter that you're not getting any deity powers. They also note here are some examples of just using a feat. If you don't want to take any of the ones in the book, you'd rather just get an extra feat at first level. Here are some examples for how to use that. They have more options. Oracle is a unique one because it actually gives you a list of special piety benefits. So instead of using your god's piety list, you get a special piety list as an oracle for one of the gods. Yeah, basically, there's a handful of them. And then we get on to races. Human is the only player's handbook race in this setting. We get centaurs, and that's the reprint of those medium-sized centaurs. Leonins, which are a new type of catfolk. These ones based on lions. Minotaurs, again, reprint of the Minotaur. Satyrs are new, another Fae race, and then reprint of Tritons. We get our subclass options. We get Bard, College of Eloquence, which is like an oratory, giving public speaking kind of bard, and then Paladin, Oath of Glory, which is the I am destined to be like a hero, a champion of the god kind of thing. We get one new background, the athlete. In Earth's history, we had the Olympic Games and all that, and they have their equivalent, and so there's athletes. Moving on to the gods of Theros. We get our normal god list, but they go into details on their gods. And like I said, each one has piety. Idea being, if you worship a god, you start with 1 piety, and as long as you're doing what the god wants, you should be getting basically 1 piety per session, as a rough estimate. And it gives you some benefits. But then we go into the god. We have Theros, a god of passage, Ephara, god of the polis, which is their word for city, Erebos, god of the dead, Heliod, god of the sun, Iroas, god of victory, Karametra, god of the harvests, Karanos, god of the storms, Cloithis, god of destiny, Krufix, god of horizons, Mogus, god of slaughter, Nylia, god of the hunt, Farika, god of affliction, Phanex, god of deception, Perforos, god of the forge, and Thassa, god of the sea, is our final one. And I figure I'll just kind of go basically over one of them because they all have their own stuff for whatever the god is god over. Starting with basic description, the influence that the god has on the world, including their goals and relationships with other deities, because like, you know, Greek myth, these deities, these gods have some interactions with each other. It's a soap opera up there kind of thing. So they have stuff on that. Just sort of an overview of worshiping that deity. They have information on being a champion of the god, which includes alignments, classes, cleric domains, and backgrounds likely for their followers. They have sort of a chart and paragraph on why this god would favor you as a champion, and then what your ideals might be, what sort of your goals are being devoted to the god. They have ideas on earning and losing piety. Earning piety would be things like preventing cataclysmic change, offering treasure to the sea, defending or maintaining one of their temples. But losing piety would be things like trying to keep secrets from the god, using magic to calm the sea's fury, or bowing to the desires or demands of another god would lose piety. And then you have your benefits. You start with 1 piety. Once you get to 3, you get your first benefit. For Thessa, it's fog cloud a certain number of times per day. It smells like strongly of the sea. And then at 10 plus, you get blink once a day. At 25 piety, you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed and or restrained, inspired by the uncontrollable nature of the sea. 50 plus piety, you can increase your dexterity or intelligence by 2, and also the maximum of that score by 2. All of the deities have basically 2 stats to choose from at their highest level piety, which realize 50 plus on average, that's probably going to be about 50 sessions into playing. So that's like a capstone edition kind of thing. And then each deity also has some of their myths, some flavor within the world. So yeah, we have our deities. Then we get realms of the gods and mortals, which, you know, gives us our map. And I mean, it talks about things like the islands and stuff aren't necessarily stuck in one spot. Like, this is a very small world view, but, you know, the world drops off at the end and things can change. You know, more of a sense of adventure than a sense of exact location. Although around the polises, where people and civilization is, that's where it's more settled. But in the mortal realms, the world of Theros, you know, they go over sort of general life and the calendar, and then we get into the polises. Akros is like a city of like war and like battle and being like a fortress kind of thing. Meletis is like a city of like knowledge and magic and progress, and it's the on the sea. It's a coastal city. And Setessa, the queen of Setessa is Karametra, the god of harvest. She has people that kind of run it for her, but it's actually like she's the queen. And it's sort of a indoor-outdoor kind of city, led by women, as men are set off on a journey when they, become of age, kind of thing. And that, children and orphans are common, find this to be their home. So it's sort of a very nature and free, whatever kind of place. And then we get, and each of the cities, by the way, discusses people of the city, its leaders, its landmarks and features, and then the places that surround it, its holdings, if it has, towns outside of it. Yeah, so you get that for each of the 3 polises, the cities. And then we get other regions. For example, where the Leonin call home. Where the Minotaurs call home. The places, there's a couple where there are a lot of returned. The undead. The Siren Sea, where the Tritons are. Skull of Vale, where the Satyrs would call home. And then a couple of mountain ranges. And those are all the mortal realms. Then we get the realms of the gods, which are Nyx, which is the heavens, the sky, like Mount Olympus, basically. And the underworld. And it talks about that, and like the Tartix River, which would be the river Styx. But yeah, so you get, brief, looks at the realms of the gods and fair detail on the mortal realms. So that's the setting. And then creating Theros adventures, which kind of goes in the idea of many of the adventures are going to be god-based adventures. Talks about things like divine assistance, because, again, being based on, like, Olympian gods, they're fond of meddling in mortal affairs. But it says, don't eliminate character choice and don't eliminate risk and danger. The gods can get involved and play around with the mortals, but that's some keys to remember. They talk about communication with the gods, omens, divination, dreams, and visions. And then we have a big list of omens where there is a small chart, D6 or D8 for each god, and then an overall D100 through all the charts for an omen. Get stuff on divine intervention, whether blessings or actually being given like magic items, miracles, and then the ordeals of the gods, sort of the what was that, the trials of Hercules kind of thing, where you have to, the gods give you this ordeal that you have to go through. And then we again go through each of the gods, and they're each going to have stuff about using them in making an adventure, as well as a location, some awesome maps, some beautiful art. But I'm just going to quickly flip right through because it makes the most sense to me to, like I did, do the same thing as I did with the actual information on the gods when we're talking about the adventures of the gods, and go right to the back to our god of the sea, since she's who we talked about before. But they have, again, all the same, the same kind of stuff detailed for each of the gods. Thaisa. So again, this kind of stuff is available for each of the other gods. We get information on her champions, the kinds of quests that they're likely to do. So like a champion might find a magically stolen vessel sequestered high in the mountains and return it to the ocean. Something was stolen from the sea, and they gotta get it back. And then there's like details on like a whole campaign based around, Thaisa. And then like being, mighty, and like characters that follow her. Thaisa's villains is just the opposite. All of the gods are this sort of, like I said, they have their Olympian god kind of level drama, so they can be good or not. And so here are ideas for using them as villains. For example, a water elemental is trapped in a village well and has changed the drinking water to salt water. It needs help returning to the sea. That is a creature that is below Thesa that is now being villainous, or, Triton, Master of the Waves, demands ever greater sacrifices to Thesa from merchants moving along crucial trade route, threatening to sink ships that don't comply. Like, followers of Thesa who are villains in this role. So they can be heroes or they can be villains. They go over the monsters that would follow each of the gods. So, hippocamps, sirens, water nymphs, tritons, water elementals, storm giants, dragon turtles, krakens. A number of different options, monsters that would be involved in this god's affair. And then Thesa as a campaign villain. If the god itself is doing some mighty thing that is what the heroes are uniting against, what's going on? And then Thesa's divine schemes, which is like examples of how the gods' whims might have ruinous impact on the world. So it's tied in with that as a villain. Short one here. When multiple gods turn against her in a dispute, Thesa is enraged. She releases the locks binding every kraken in the sea, along with that of an ancient and mysterious kraken broodmother. So the interplay of the gods turns where she gets angry and she just releases all the krakens. That is Thesa as a campaign villain. And there's a few options here and just overarching ideas. But yeah. And then we get a setting. For example, for her, a coastal temple. You get a description of it, adventures that could happen there, such as needing to steal an offering before it washes away, or help a killer whale beached in the temple. We get basic, a map and a description of it in a very basic method. And then villains of a coastal temple, such as a giant octopus under the effects of the Awaken spell hunts in the temple at high tide. So, some sort of options for adventures in this location, and there is a variety that could be used. We then move on from the adventures related to the gods and move on to Nautical Adventures, which goes over sailing, getting lost, maintaining relationships while at sea. And a little side box that says, just because you're in a seafaring game, if you're, out on a voyage with the Argonauts, you don't have to get all bogged down with what's starboard and what's port, etc., etc. That's not necessary. You can you're on adventure. And it basically says if you want to do all that kind of stuff, get the Ghost of Saltmarsh book and use the appendices there. Not included in this book. They go over mystical islands with mystical island environments, such as a mirage. Magical phenomena surround a mundane island with tempting or treacherous illusions. And then we get island inhabitants, such as the dead. A settlement of the returned is located near an obscure passage to the underworld. So, just various things, island magical properties, things to make island, this sort of thing where you're journeying from one island to the next. That sort of, thinking of some of the Ray Harryhausen movies of my youth, where the Argonauts are off on those adventures and such. So you have that. Then you get underwater adventures. I mean, Tritons are one of the creatures here, so there's some options for that. And then we go to underworld adventures, and the comment that just because a player dies doesn't mean it's the end of their adventure. There are ways to get people out. And they turn out to, the paths of escape, who is there and who is guarding it, and just some other adventures beyond that could happen in the underworld. Some plot points to use. And then we get an example adventure. I didn't read this because I don't use pre-made adventures, but from the art, it clearly involves at least harpies and the returned, and it's an adventure for 4 to 6 first-level players that'll be second level by the end of it. Moving on. That's a great starting adventure to get you involved in the setting. Then we go to treasure. Love this art. It's whatever. Within the workshop, the Triton genius, Delekos, equips a satyr and leonin with the tools they need to become legends. And if you see this, she's getting, like, wings. Which, I'm just hoping they're not made of wax. And our treasure is basically magic items, which the first thing it says is basically gift to the gods, and says whatever, here is a table that you can use to make pretty much whatever magic item you have seem more special than it is. More tied into the setting, perhaps, than it is. And then we get into, like, actual magic item descriptions. This first one is great. It's Flying Chariot. It's a +1 bonus chariot that if it's pulled by a flying creature, it also can fly. That's cool, that's fine, that's whatever. The box here that it grants, though, is rules for using a chariot, which is based on the mounted combat rules, but expanded. Awesome. I love that. Helm of the Gods, Molten Bronze Skin, which is basically metal armor that just coats your skin in bronze, so it doesn't have disadvantage. You get resistance to fire, and it can't be removed. You can wear it under your clothes. Basically giving you bronze skin. Awesome. Love it. Version of Aqueous Form, a cursed item, Siren Song Lyre, Sling Bullets, and Two-Bird Sling. So showing a type of item that maybe we ignore in normal D&D that is important here. And then we get artifacts, which there's just a handful of artifacts for the gods. We'll look quickly at the Bident of Thesa, as we've looked at her so far. So not a trident, a Bident, whatever. It gets basic magic item stuff. It has Blessing of the Deep, which is to say, if you are a follower of Thesa, depending on your piety, it gets the randomly determined properties that artifacts get. It has a number of those, either major or minor properties, and benefits based on your piety. If you are not a worshipper of her, this one gets one minor and one major detrimental property, so it has some bad stuff if you're not a follower of her. And then you also get, whatever, this one is Command of the Deep, Aquatic Metamorphosis, so you get a couple of other properties beyond that it has, and then there's all of them have rules for destroying it. Yeah, so there's a few of them. I think, what, five different artifacts of the 15 gods. So, carrying on, friends and foes. Starting with Nyx-born creatures, which is the idea of Nyx is their heavens, and it's all the art that involves the stars in the shadows. That's how you know it's Nyx-born. That's what Nyx-born creatures look like. But any creature can be made a Nyx-born creature if the gods create it. So there's just a quick little D6 chart of some options to make those creatures feel special beyond just saying there's stars in their shadows. And then we get into just using classic monsters. Basilisk, Cyclops, Dragon, Kraken, Lamia, Medusa, Night Hags, Sphinx, Unicorn. All of them are available in the Monster Manual. Here is descriptions of how to use them and what they're like, and in the case of Medusa, some extra traits to use them in this setting for monsters you already know and already have access to from the Monster Manual. We then get our new monsters in this bestiary. Anvil Rots are the idea of those, like, creatures that are made of metal, which this owl would be an Anvil Raptor as well as this, but is a little more familiar from, again, one of those shows that, I watched as a kid, but those, and you can have one as a familiar. So, little mechanical owl. But there's other Anvil Rots, Bronze Sable, Burnished Heart, Gold Forged Sentinel. So you get a variety of those. Archons are the beings that used to rule the world long ago. And they ride special either winged bulls or winged lions, and you get stats for those. We have our two-headed, medium-sized Cerebrus, just normal little creature, and then our underworld Cerebrus, the large monstrosity with 3 heads. So we get those. We get Chimera, the basic stat block and charts for body, head, breath, weapon, and tail. Options to make a wide variety of different types of chimeras. We get to the Colossus of Akros, which is like a construct that guards the road into Akros to help defend it. We get some of the demons from the underworld. A few different options for those. The Eidolons are the idea that when someone escapes the underworld, generally their soul is ripped from them. They become a returned, which is like a faceless creature in a gold mask that loses all personality, and their soul flies away and becomes an Eidolon separate from them. So they're like stripped, torn in two. Fleece Mane Lion is an extra big lion. Perhaps a ordeal of the gods might require you to go slay one. We get some giants. There are the primal giants, which are the ones that we know from the monster manual. But there are other giants. Doomwake Giant, 100-handed one, which is like a craftsman that got fed up with the gods' schemes or something. Then we get harpies, which we have a named harpy, and then our blood troll harpy, and they're like normal harpies in the monster manual can be made pretty and use their harpy song, their whatever, what is it called? Luring song, and be made into sirens. We get our hippocamp, so a mount for tritons. Hoplites, they have 3 different stats for the 3 different cities, and these are the human soldiers for the different polises. Hydras, we get a Iron Scale Hydra, and then a named the World Eater, like higher challenge rating Hydra. You have a Leonin, so if you need just, obviously the different races have their own, they can either be allies or enemies, kind of thing, so ability to use it. Nyx Fleece Ram with Powers of the Fleece. Again, pulling from those old movies I grew up with. New nymphs. We have nymphs of like fields and grain, a nymph of the underworld, one of water, and one of fire. We have a stat block for an oracle. The Phylaskia are I think the underworld guardians. The returned, few stat blocks for those. I mentioned with the Eidolons before. Well, these are what the bodies become. We have a couple stat blocks for satyrs, just as we had for leonins. Again, a couple for tritons, and then a couple other monsters here. Before we move on to the mythic monsters, we have 3 named mythic monsters: 1 spider creature, 1 Medusa creature, and 1 Kraken, each of which is, has its normal monster manual description and stat block as a very high challenge rating, for example, 26 creature, but also they each have a mythic trait, which says basically once you've gotten rid of all their hit points, they come back, they have their hit points. This one, maybe a different way of having to attack them, and their legendary actions add some new options because they're a mythic monster, and by the time you finish beating them, they count as 2 of that CR. So beating this as a mythic creature is 2 challenge rating 26 creatures, is the equivalent of what you just beat. Basically, that is what your end game is probably leading up to, kind of thing. So awesome. And then our index, which I found interesting because in addition to the normal index stuff, they also list all the different myths, which are in there, and they're in little sidebars all throughout, and I skipped them completely as I went through the book. Every time I saw the sidebar, I just skipped over it. But apparently there's some importance to it, because they bother to mention them separately here. For me, I'm not... But I guess technically if you're looking more into the world, and you're running in the world, that's a great way to tie it in. Into the history of the world is through the myths. So, wonderful. And that, again, is Mythic Odysseys of Theros. So, whether you're just looking for it for a few race options, class option, subclass options, that new background of athletes, some magic items, some awesome monsters, including some really epic mythical monsters to end your campaign with. It's great for all that. Or if you want to play in the actual setting, if you want to, if you're a big fan of Magic the Gathering or Theros, or even just looking for a unique twist on a setting of the, ancient Greece kind of flavor. You can sort of get that kind of adventure out of this. Or really, if you're running an ancient Greece campaign, there's still some great ideas to steal from this, even if you just change the names that they changed in here back to what they would be for that, for the Olympian gods and such. It's also, if you're just looking for a different pantheon to apply to your own world, maybe you don't feel like building your own gods, you can just steal a very fleshed out pantheon from this, because that is 2 different chapters of the book. One is for describing the gods, and then the other is describing adventures about the gods. So there's lots of information for them if you want to steal some of that. It's got the locations for each of the gods, so there's a variety of those. Or for me, the most likely case of me ever using it might be when they've done enough of them, I may run a planeswalking game where, while I may not be necessarily doing my own setting, I would, like I said, sometimes I'll use existing settings briefly in a campaign. So if I was jumping between a bunch of different Magic the Gathering settings, I've thought of that and thought that'd be pretty fun. So I will link where you can pick this up online down below. They did an alternate art cover from your friendly local gaming store. You can pick that up from them, of course. You can check it out. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.